Okay, I think we're about good to go now. So let's get cracking. Welcome, and as I said, if it's your first time here this morning, welcome to the webinar. We've got a great load of people here this morning, which is wonderful, and it's for a topic which I really thought twice about. There's a couple I've really wondered about. One was to do with managing upwards, and this one too has made me wonder how easy it's going to be, not least of all because apparently it's such a soft topic. Praise is something that we know we ought to do intuitively. We don't talk a lot about it. It's nothing to do with meeting the numbers. And so I was somewhat nervous about covering it because it might be seen as something less than core to the business. But the more I've thought about it, and in fact, I run, if you've worked with me, you know the sort of programs I run, you know the sort of coaching that I do, and actually praise, when I really think about it, feedback is absolutely at the core of what we do in work as people who are managing and leading people, and as what I do as a business, which is to get people to think about their behaviour and how their feelings impact on their behaviour and their ability to lead people. So I have some ambitions. I'd like to challenge you this morning about your own personal habits around praise. I'd really like you to try something out as a result of all this. I'd ask you to be prepared to change something, even if it's something really small, and then let me know what happened. The second thing is that this format means that there are real limits to how interactive this is going to be. So we're sort of stuck with that bit. But what you can do is to share your thoughts in the Q&A pane. Normally what we do is we work with what's going on in the room so that the more news, feedback, reactions you give me, the more interesting this makes the conversation. It makes it into more of a conversation. Now, what we're about here is making intelligent choices about our behaviour and about exploring the feelings and the thoughts that we have behind it. So I'm hoping we can achieve a little bit of that this morning. So the scheme for the webinar, as usual, but for those who are new to it, and there are many new faces and names, which is absolutely fantastic, here's how it all works. So we're going to spend about 35 minutes on material, something like that. And then at the end of that, at around about 5 past 10, we're going to have a few minutes for Q&A. And then I'm going to aim to end on the dot of 10:15. Now, if for any reason we'll shove a little summary in here. If for any reason there's stuff left over, as I said, I will do another mini Q&A at the end of this. Right, without further ado, let me go on to the first piece, first thought for you. What is praise? Let's get that. I like a definition. Let's get that one cleared out. So praise, I looked it up, obviously on Google, as we do, and there's nowhere else to go these days. And it's something about, in terms of the noun, it's about showing some approval, some admiration. What worried me slightly when I looked at it, there's also this possibility of flattery, and that's obviously not what we're aiming for. Flattery makes it sound like it's something that we don't really mean, that we're buttering somebody up because we want something out of them. And if there's something that puts, I think, a lot of people off from giving other people praise, be it colleagues, their boss, their reports, is that it might come across as not genuine, or that we are just flattering somebody. And that, I think, is a shame. But there are ways that we can avoid that. And I'd like to show you some of them this morning. But firstly, I want to share a story with you. And this is absolutely genuine. I didn't intend for this to happen. But I was in the city last Friday. And I was freezing cold, it's when the cold snap first started, and I ended up in Pret-a-Manger. I had 15 minutes to spare. I hadn't really had much breakfast. I thought, okay, I'm going into a really important meeting here. I've got to fuel up. So I went in and had a croissant and a hot chocolate. And as I sat there, I had about 10 minutes and I was wolfing it down, and the hot chocolate, I thought, my gosh, this is really good stuff. I didn't expect it to be, not least of all because it's a Pret, and Pret is not particularly my thing. But I was blown away by it. And I was in a real rush. I was very much focused in on the meeting that I was going into. It was a kick-off meeting for a new project, so I was really thinking about that. And I was just about to walk out the door. I thought, well, I quite like to thank them. I thought, oh, it's ridiculous. Pret-a-Manger is just a huge chain. What do they care about what I think? And then I saw the girl behind the counter, and I thought, well, actually, she might give a damn about what I think. So I'm going to go and thank her for my hot chocolate. It's a bit embarrassing, but I'm going to go and do it. And of course, sod's law, there were 3 of them that had collected behind the counter, and there was no one else in the shop. And I thought, oh, in for a penny. So I went and I thanked her for my drink, and told her that it was absolutely wonderful. And her reaction was absolutely fantastic. And I thought, well, that was really worth it. She didn't expect me to thank her. And I hadn't anticipated doing it just because it was a chain store. I didn't imagine that I counted for anything, or my thanks counted for anything. So that's the sort of thing that gets in my way, that stops me from doing something simple but yet really important, like praise. I'd really like to hear now, what stops you from praising people? Now, do you have a particular, or maybe you do, maybe you're much better and nicer than I am, but type something into the Q&A pane. What stops you? Just one-liners, a few words, and I'm going to read them out as you type in. What actually stops you giving praise? What gets in your way? So Carolyn says, too busy, you forget to do it. Fear of looking silly, says Tony. Time, says Louisa. Attitudes. Missing the moment, Ali. Not sure how to. Some of our managers don't give praise as it is deemed to be part of their job. Yes, good one. People sometimes feel embarrassed when you do praise them, says Petra. Yes, indeed. Sounding insincere is what John's worried about. Donna thinks it won't be appreciated. You know, Donna, that's exactly what I thought. I didn't think they would care what I thought, because I was just one of 1,000, 2,000 customers who'd walked in. Thinking they don't need it, says Carolyn. Hugh says, very little. It always seems to work, and it uplifts the giver as well as the receiver. Hugh, you're a better man than I, but thank you. Sharon says there's too many other things on my mind. Lynn says, for colleagues at a high level, fear of being viewed as a suck-up. Really good point, Lynn. Giving feedback up and doing it in front of colleagues. Well, let's see if we can overcome that one. Being self-conscious, not sure how to do it, says Natalie. More than one person has said that. I like to be rounded. I either praise or feedback. So I'm not a good complainer, so don't praise either. That's a really interesting point, Tony. Elizabeth says, being in my own world too much. I can identify with that. Denise, they should be doing it already. So I think, Denise, you're saying they should be working hard and doing their job already, but I'm not sure that's what you mean. Always seen as a big thing. It should be like breathing. So Frank says he's always seen it as important. Louisa says, where should you give feedback? Some people just don't want it. Yes, where? We don't want to embarrass people. Kate, lastly, when you give praise, people reckon it's just my job. It puts you off giving praise again. Okay. Yeah. So I think that's maybe what the earlier meaning was. People might react and say, well, I'm just doing my job. What are you on about? And it makes it embarrassing for us, the praise giver. Absolutely get that. So let's see if we can get over some of these things, or at least get around them. Things that make it, what actually makes praise hard? Well, the thing is, what gets in the way, the things like time, are actually the very elements of praise, the very qualities. Not really qualities. What am I trying to say here? What makes it hard for us is what makes people appreciate the gesture of doing it quite so much. And I just want to go through some of them, the main ones here. And I think the foundation of this bit is that everybody realizes that we're busy. There is no such thing as an easy job these days. Everyone at every level feels the pressure. So, for example, The person who we're giving praise to already knows that we don't have the time. He knows you're busy and that it took some effort to do it because he's busy too. The person who works in accounts, Dawn, knows she's invisible. She knows that there are 100 different people around and that really she doesn't figure that heavily in your life. But when she does something and you notice it, and you maybe only speak to her once a year, that's really important. And if we make the effort to say something, she will remember that for a very long time. People who are doing their job recognize that they're just doing their job. And they don't expect us to say anything. But actually, despite somebody's reaction, even if they're embarrassed, and they say, oh, well, I'm just doing my job, it doesn't mean that they haven't actually appreciated it. And we have to hold our own. We have to stay brave and recognize that it was worth it, even if we don't get that warm, fuzzy feeling in the moment with them. And because we're so busy, because we are permanently distracted, people do recognize that. And when we take the time, as unusually, very unusually, I did the other day when I really had to hurtle out of the door, it makes a massive difference because nobody expects us to make the time. So here are some of the things that you actually brought up as not objections, but blocks that you have to giving people praise. Those very things that you named are the reasons why praise comes across as so powerful, as so energizing, because people recognize that it's difficult for us. So the thing that makes it difficult are the things that make it so valuable. And indeed, there are staged opportunities where we get to give praise, and we think that that's the time to do it. It sort of lets us off the hook. But actually, we know that when it's staged, it's just too easy. And although we give it's probably the only time we give it its proper opportunity, it really doesn't have the strength that it has when we do it when it's with someone who's invisible, when we're pushed for time, when we're distracted, when we've got bigger fish to fry, when somebody was just doing their job. All of those small, apparently insignificant occasions are so much more critical than these big praise and criticism showdowns where we think we're facing the person when we've made a special occasion of it. That special occasion just lacks the spontaneity and the effort that make praise important for people. So, if it's not that important, or if it's not important to do it when it's staged, but more important to do it when it's actually genuine, when it's on the spur of the moment, that would be another way to put it. What does it actually do? What does it actually achieve? Well, I thought about this, and there's something rather sort of Maslowian about this. And so I put together this little diagram, which I think says something about what praise is actually for, what it actually does. Well, at its most basic, I think praise reassures people that they are actually doing the right things, the right tasks. This was pointed out to me just right at the beginning of this week. I saw a new coaching client, and she, one of the things that was really, I suppose, poignant about the session was that I told her a number of things that her boss had never told her. That's not unusual. I'm often in the position, and if you do coaching and you're listening and you've been given some feedback to pass on, and the person will swear blind that they've already told their report this thing, and you sit down in front of them and you realise that it's the first they've heard of it, or at least they didn't receive it. So at its most basic, feedback says you're on the right track, you're doing the right stuff. Good feedback, good quality feedback, I'm coming on to the structure of that in a minute. And yes, it does have a structure. At the risk of sounding disingenuous, there are certain elements we can put into praise which makes it even more valuable. More of that in a minute. But we can give somebody some real clarity about the specifics of the effect of their behaviour and exactly what they did. So that it's not only about they're doing the right things, but they're actually doing them right. And here now we come on to the tops of the pyramids, and this is where I think a lot of the put-off factor exists. Praise gives people pleasure. And I think an important and the predominant bit for us as people giving somebody some praise, some feedback, is to give them some pleasure, is to make them feel great. And if that sounds wishy-washy, and I suppose in a way it does, but we know, if we're honest with ourselves, we know what it's like to feel like that. And money can't buy it. Not the nicest weekend or the nicest holiday can buy feeling good, even for a few moments at work, because of something that somebody has said. So there's this, it's a kind of child pleasure. It's not childish and it's not childlike. We feel it as adults. And lastly, probably the top of the pyramid, the most controversial, is pride. Feeling proud is not fashionable. And actually, truth be told, in most of our upbringings, we were probably told off more than once. And maybe I'm just saying more about my family than I am about yours. But actually, feeling proud was somehow, I found out along the line that it was not the thing to feel. And God forbid if I should feel proud in front of my school friends or my classmates when I'd done something right, when a teacher said, "Well done, Furey." Incidentally, I can assure you that didn't happen very often. But it's just like what was raised a few minutes ago by one person. They said, being seen as someone who is sucking up or being seen as someone who is sucked up to could be very awkward. But I think there's something that we can do, there's lots we can do with the delivery that gets over that problem entirely. Okay, so that's what I think praise does. And if we're really honest, not one of us would choose to not be well thought of. And by leaving out this really obvious piece of humanness, we're missing a massive, unsophisticated, simple way to move people to action. By enabling them to feel, just to feel good about themselves. So, I don't know how you're reacting to this, but if you're finding this, if there's even one of you finding this difficult to swallow, this possibility of making people feel good and happy, then consider this. There is one more benefit, and this is the one which most businesses and senior people and maybe we would admit to, the one that we feel okay about, and that is that giving genuine feedback, genuine positive feedback, genuine praise earns us the possibility of succeeding with criticism. If I point out when you do the things that I like and that add value for me and that help your colleagues, when it comes to criticizing you, I can think in my own heart, well, I've earned the right to do this. She can't possibly mind because I'm always saying nice things to her. So one possibility at its most base is that if we're prepared to make the time to give people praise, that when it comes to giving them criticism, they are going to be very, very keen to make something work. But that, I think, is probably the most base and almost unfortunate reason to make praise part of our lives, something that we do. So with the whys and wherefores, why we do it, why we don't do it, So let's get down to some mechanics here. But before I do, some of the strengthening factors, and I think there are three things we can do with praise that can make it really stick in any situation. The first is to be subjective. Now, people often, particularly in a business environment, not so much in our private lives, but people think that we have to be objective, that the best thing we can do is to call on facts and figures. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't cut it, because we're all so inured to those things that actually what really means something at the end of the day is how we make somebody feel, whether we choose to admit it or not. So when we tell somebody that they made us feel pleased, when we tell someone that they made us feel comfortable, impressed, relieved, all of those things, that's the thing that's going to sink in. How we made somebody feel. And when somebody tells us that we made them feel something positive, that will go in very quickly. So being subjective, I think, is essential, because that's the power behind the praise. The other very powerful factor is being specific. Wishy-washy praise is embarrassing and actually irritating. I've told the story before, but I'll tell it again. This is quite a few months, so I'm hopefully if you have heard me talk about this before, it'll still stick. I did a massive project about 20 years ago with London Underground, and I can talk about the person, but I'm not going to name him. But he was a really nice chap. I liked him a lot. And he was running one of the bits of the Bakerloo line where I was based. And he, when we did some module that I was doing on the program to do with feedback and praise, I think, he said, oh, Paul, every evening I go around my whole office, and he had about 65 people. He was a pretty senior manager on the line, and his people were on 3 different floors. And he says, Paul, I go and see everybody and say goodnight to them and say thank you for their work. And that's exactly what he did. He went to every single person's desk and said, night, John, thanks very much indeed. Night, Jane, thanks very much indeed. Pete, thanks very much indeed. And he just went around. His heart was completely in the right place. It must have taken him 25 minutes every day. But it was seen as a joke. It was partly seen as a joke, A, because he did it to everybody, and secondly, because actually there was nothing specific about what he was doing. Nobody really knew what they were being thanked for. However, he was at least being brief. He did at least keep it short, and I think that is also really important. Because if we're worried about people getting embarrassed, there's actually only one more. There's an embarrassing part of praise. If I look at myself, and if somebody says, "Paul, I was really impressed when you did that," I can handle that, and I think, "Oh, thanks very much," and that does mean something. But when it goes on, a couple of things happen. Firstly, I begin to cringe. Because it's too much. And then I begin to wonder whether it's genuine. And then if it goes on for a really long time, I begin to wonder what's coming next. So the brevity piece stops people cringing. It gives people a chance to recognize very quickly that it's genuine, because it's not going on and becoming general. And it stops them being suspicious that we're after something more. So, Bluebird, think Twitter. Think really brief and punchy and to the point. So, how to actually do this? I want to give you an actual structure for this, because it seems to work so well. And far from being disingenuous or not genuine, I think it really helps us to make sure that we're hitting the right topics, that we're actually putting the right information in there. So people who've been hanging around for a bit will have come across this before, but there are 3 elements, and this is very much kicking off with the subjectivity. when I'm giving somebody a piece of feedback, positive or negative, and this is the really sort of the F factor, which is the feedback factor, making praise feedback as well. The first thing I do is to think how I feel. What did I feel when they did that thing, either just now or earlier today? The secondly, specifically, what was it about? What did they actually do, or what was it about the way that they did it that makes me want to say something? And if I can figure it out, I also try and figure out why. Why did I feel like that about that thing so much? And then, and this is really important, I pause. I do my very best to not only keep it short, but to be quiet and to give the person the thinking space to take it in and also to react if they want to. So how does this sound? Well, it might sound like, I was really relieved when you returned my message so quickly because I desperately need your help. I was impressed when I'm going to take these off here. I was impressed when you tackled that really nasty question from the client in the meeting because I was totally at a loss for what to say. I was relieved when you took that extra piece of work from me because I really didn't want to let Jane down. So that is the structure, and that's, I think, a way of delivering a piece of praise which really means something, not just at an emotional level, which I think is the most important, but actually gives them that important specific detail which says, oh, I know what this is about, and actually it's not embarrassing anymore because it contains that factual element that we like to have. Okay, last couple of minutes. What could possibly go wrong? Well, judging by the fact that most of us avoid praise, giving praise often, quite a lot. But here are 3 things that can go wrong, but 3 things that are totally avoidable. So here's the first. The first thing is that it is so generalized and ungenuine. Giving mass praise simply doesn't work. Even if it's a team of 3 or 4 people, or 3, or even 2 people, who is it meant for? Better to give one piece 4 times over in a different way. Even by email, it's just popped into my head. Often people will thank their teams or a group for doing something and by email. Okay, email is sometimes the only solution, but it might be worth considering sending one email written differently, even if it's a one-liner, 4 different times to avoid this lady's mistake. So that's the first thing. Praise is often too general and too generalized. Okay, the second problem that we can encounter is that it is often too late. We leave it, we miss the moment, as somebody raised right at the very beginning. I missed the moment and I didn't do it. Now, I happen to think that it's worth going back to say, look, I forgot to say the other day, but it was really important to me and I want to make sure you understand. I was so pleased when you XYZ. What really gets my goat is when praise is written down and fed back to us every 6 months, that conveyor belt moment. And here's one that also I have difficulty with when it's patronizing, or I suppose I have a real patronized antennae going all the time. I want praise to be subjective. I don't want you to tell me that you, in your learned opinion, you think I'm doing a good job. Incidentally, because I know there are clients in the room this morning. So if you want to tell me I'm doing a good job, that's fine. I'll take it from you, by the way. But there's a way of doing it. So here are some phrases that for me epitomise the sort of the pat on the head. You did a brilliant job. You're a wonderful chairman. I think you're great at organising teams. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing that, for goodness sake. It's better than nothing. But because it is judgmental, I have to trust and respect the person who's saying those things to me. And if I do, that's absolutely fine. But I wonder if it's a chance worth taking. I would rather be more subjective with my praise, with my feedback, and say, when you did this, I felt this way. And I think it's a safer route to avoiding people being patronised and embarrassed, particularly if we're passing praise up the line. Okay, so that's the story so far. I'd really very much like to get your thoughts and reactions. So I'm just going to open up my own control pane here and see. Yes, questions, thoughts, reactions. This is the time to put them into the Q&A pane and let me know what you're thinking. It's the feedback route that really interested me. Yeah. I think it helps to take care of a lot of the problems. Thanks, Tony. Jennifer, thank you for your comment. Just said thank you, it really helped. Louisa mentions managing the reaction to the feedback. What if someone is dismissive? Okay, this is a good one. So the potential here is to actually empathise with them, Louisa. So if you I say something nice to you, Louisa, I say, oh, Louisa, I was just really pleased when you came up with those ideas, because I was totally stuck. And you say, well, that's just what I'm doing. That's my job. And then I could empathise with you, and I could say, it sounds like you think that's no big deal, or you weren't expecting me to say thank you, maybe. But we can point out the reaction and say, it doesn't sound like you think it's important. And you say, well, I'm just doing my job. And then I have an opportunity to reiterate and say, well, actually, I know you're just doing your job. You may even think it's a bit weird that I'm saying this to you, but it really did make a difference. So I would go straight back and tackle the reaction, not to make them feel more embarrassed, but to give me another opportunity to make sure that the praise has really landed. Charlotte, lovely to see you back, by the way. I was lovely to see your name on the list. So Charlotte says, are there any studies that show praise increases productivity so I can persuade my teams to do it? Yes. I'm sure there are. And in fact, my colleague, Emma Donaldson-Fielder, she's done a huge amount of really corking research on well-being at work. She did a particular research piece, a longitudinal study about what happened when people criticise their bosses and back, and I say criticise in the best possible way. It does have an actual measurable effect on morale when feedback moves up and down the line. So Emma Donaldson-Fielder is the one who's done the research, and she would be delighted to hear from you. And interestingly, Charlotte, if you do want to track it down, I will put you in touch. Just drop me a line. I can't help thinking, though, that wouldn't it be lovely if it was enough that it made people feel good? And in your line of business, Charlotte, that should be enough, I think. But anyway, the research is definitely there. Okay, another Charlotte M. What do you think about praise in an upwards direction, e.g. for a manager? I think managers and hearing praise from down below is more important than ever. It's blooming lonely and often really disconcerting when we don't know what the troops think. We expect praise from above, or feedback at least, if not praise. But it's wonderful when people tell us that we're doing a good job. And so I'd have no hesitations suggesting give it a try, Charlotte M, and do it subjectively. Tony says, just wondering about the importance of body language alongside the verbal praise. Okay, I'm assuming that it's about how will I look. Here's the thing, I think if we're feeling right, we look right. So if my intentions are good and I've got my ducks in a row, it will be fine. So I tell people, do not think or worry about body language it's irrelevant if you can get your own internal act together. Then that's the important thing. Get your own feelings together, and the body language will follow. Jennifer says, I always sound sarcastic when I give praise, and I think this will really help me sound more sincere. That's great. I'm very, very pleased. I know how good I feel when someone else takes the time to give me praise. So need to get over the concerns I have when giving it and be brave. Thank you, Donna. Absolutely. One more before I stop for the summary. I recently praised someone in a group, and they went bright red and told me afterwards that they hated public praise and that I felt I was, by implication, criticising everyone else. Ouch. Vicky, that's very powerful. Yes, that's an interesting one. And I guess that's maybe my reaction to that is to maybe take it up with the team. If it was in a team meeting, maybe it's a worthwhile topic to bring up, but certainly going back to the individual and finding out what it's really about, I think might be important. It would be important to me. It sounds, if I'm really honest, like it's more to do with him or her, the person who received your praise, and that they felt absolutely terrible. It struck me just now, also be to do with the fact that maybe they don't hear you giving other people praise very often, and the person felt really exposed. It throws up a lot of interesting questions, but certainly pursue it, Vicky. That's a really interesting one. Okay, there are lots of other questions that I'd like to tackle, and I will. There's at least another 8 or 9. So for now, in the spirit of keeping to time, I'm just going to summarise my thoughts for this morning, and then come back to do the rest of the questions. And I'm hoping that you can stay on if you have a question that's unanswered at this stage. So, in summary, I don't think this will come as a surprise, but for me, be subjective. For me, it's so important that this stuff comes from the heart, and it's not just a question of coming from the heart. Our feelings are so much about what we pick up. They are so sensitive to our environment that I think it is not only the most powerful way, but the most sensitive way of giving somebody feedback that's really going to mean something. So for me, it's very much about it coming from the heart. Even if I'm giving some praise up, in fact, maybe even more importantly, if it's about me praising a client or my line manager. The second thing for me is that it absolutely has to be specific. And I think nailing the actual piece that I am pleased about is important, so that the praise actually stands up, and that somebody can say, he really meant it, because if he didn't, he wouldn't have chosen that particular thing. I think being very specific also makes the whole body language, the internal comfort translating to external comfort, I think that all falls into place. And being specific also means that people can do it again, that they've got something to pitch for. And I suppose that the last, and I don't know why that sun's there, I put 4 down and I only have 3 things to say. So anyway, we get an extra sun. But I think making praise more frequent than the criticism is probably one of the most important things, if not the most important thing. Because I know that I am extremely good at finding fault. And I don't put it down to anything other than, well, I'll blame my mother. But my whole job is about troubleshooting, is about helping people with problems. So I'm not really surprised that I'm so good at spotting the darn things. But I really do wish that it's a noise that I could turn down in my head. So if I have a personal mission in all of this, is to be really sharp in picking up on the good things, which then make my negative news, my bad news, my tough feedback stick and be more poignant than it can be without the praise. It's 10:14. That's or thereabouts. So if you're still able to stick around, I'm really pleased. I can see that a good few of you are still here, and I'm going to work my way through these questions now. I'm going to. So lots of questions and comments, which is brilliant. Natalie, I completely agree with you regarding praise that can be patronising, especially with people who are introverts. They need simple, genuine, timely acknowledgement. Absolutely spot on, Natalie. Tony, a session balancing praise and criticism would be really interesting. Mastering the feedback sandwich can be very challenging. Tony, you've got a deal. We'll do that one, and we'll definitely do that one, the balancing bit. Thank you for the suggestion. Gary, sometimes blanket praise to a group can be conceived that the sender of the praise is putting themselves on a pedestal, limelight grabbing. Who the hell do they think they are? Totally agree. Group praise, skip it. Thank you very much indeed for that one. Charlotte says, thank you, Charlotte, for thanking me. Vicky, won't the pause lead to an awkward silence? That's a good point. Well, I suppose. Well, you're worried about making it worse by sort of having your eyes drilling into theirs. I guess the silence will last as long as you want it. I think some silence is worth it. And even if it's just for them to mumble something and say, see you later. But it's not essential, and it doesn't have to be embarrassing. But I get that it could be, Vicky. Frank says, Principal, can I say something to you? Teacher, yes. Principal, when I see a lesson like the one you have just delivered, here comes the what happened bit. It makes me realise just how many excellent teachers we have in the academy. The ending changes because you want to reinforce the good behaviour. Just keep doing more of it. I like that. And if there was a build on that, Frank, I'd love to hear what the feeling is in there. But I like that example very much, actually, Frank. Yeah, that would work for me. Yeah. Tony Reese, thanks, Paul. Have a good day. Here we go. Carolyn says, I like the 3-point formula, which will soon become natural with practice. It's a choice to do it. Absolutely. And I'm just worthwhile training the team in these steps. Definitely worthwhile training people. It's so important. Thank you for that, Carolyn. Public or private? Asked Carolyn as well. Public or private? Which is the best in your opinion? The old saying goes, praise in public, criticize in private. It's a judgment thing. Some people will just die. I quite like one-to-one, actually, myself, strangely. Yeah, I like it one-to-one, and I have a suspicion that most people do. Kate also asked, is there any way I can listen to the seminar again or share it with my colleagues? Yes, it'll be recorded, and we'll get the recording link out to you in a few days' time, Kate. Sort of mid next week. That's it, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging on. I hope it was worth it. Thank you for entrusting me with your time this morning. I know everybody is mega busy, so look forward to hearing from you, staying in touch, and definitely see you this time next month. Bye for now.